Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers. Brought to you by the good people at CACI, the Center for American Culture and Ideas. Here is where my actual work day begins, because work is definitionally unpleasant. What's new and exciting in your world this week, Antony?
What is new in my... good Lord, this is the point at which you want a quick hit, isn't it?
Yeah, shall I go with mine while you dig furiously through the internet to find one? Mine is so good that we could both talk about it.
No, I've got one. This is how confused I am from today. We set up this recording thing. I'm here ready to go. I'm actually waiting on you. So you pull the trigger, and it's just now that I realize I haven't done my homework. However, I do have this one thing that I'd sent to you a couple of weeks ago. The headline is, Employer Cancels Flexible Work Policy.
No, that's the foolishness of the week. What's wrong with you?
So you are going to use it. All right.
Nope, I'm not now. Now you can go yourself, for crying out loud. Go ahead, please.
Employer cancels flexible work policy after employee cuts their finger at home. And apparently the boss is concerned that this is going to create some kind of OSHA problem, which actually he's got a point. I mean, I don't know anything about the law, but I could see an argument that I'm working from home, but I'm on the company's time and I get injured and then I file some kind of workplace injury claim. Of course, I don't know how that would fall out, but I could imagine people taking it seriously enough that it goes somewhere and occupies at least the company's time to deal with, if not the actual dollars.
The kicker here is, if you can do that, can't you just do anything?
Well, yeah, the question is on the company's time.
If I'm on company time, I guess, and I go out to lunch and I slip and fall and hurt myself, does that mean he can cancel everybody's lunch from that day forward?
Well, possibly. I don't know. But this sounds a lot like a foolishness that you brought up, good Lord, more than a year ago, maybe 4 years ago. It was during COVID, where some kid, high school kid, I guess, of course, in the age of COVID, he's doing his classes online with the teacher, and hanging on the wall behind him, this is in his house, on the wall hanging behind him is a shotgun. Perfectly legal in whatever state it was. The school then says, well, this is school time, and he's brought a gun to school in quotes. And
Right.
Apparently the kid gets some sanction because of this.
I'm just left at the same place I find myself all the time, where I look up and I say, what's wrong with everybody?
Yeah. I
just don't know what's wrong with everybody. People got to cut it out. Anyway, I'm just going to be angry with you for stealing the foolishness, but no, it's okay. I had an even better foolishness in my pocket, so it works out quite well. But I want to talk about something that we often look into, you and I, but that we don't talk about all that much, and that's the annual FBI crime data. Did you take a look at the recent data dump that we got from FBI?
I didn't. I use their data a lot, but I have not seen this.
I do too, and I think it's quite reliable, and they do an admirable job of keeping it, I think, in pretty good shape. Turns out, Ant, shockingly, violent crime is down straight across the board.
I know it went up during COVID.
Yeah, murder and non-negligent manslaughter down by 12%.
Huh. No, I didn't know that.
Largest drop in the last 20 years. Rape down 9%, robbery by 0.3%, aggravated assault by 3%.
I did see, related to that, some survey asking respondents how many black men do you think are shot by police?
Annually?
Yes, annually.
For all reasons?
Yes.
Huh. Well, let's play this game, because you know the answer and I don't.
This would be shot by police, I would presume police in the line of duty.
I don't think it would make any difference. I'm going to go with, it's going to sound ridiculous, but I bet it's closer to right than most people. Something in the neighborhood of about 300 or 400.
Now, very interesting you say that. Now, I have not looked up these numbers. I'm just repeating the thing that I saw. The thing that I saw said less than 30 on an annual basis.
Yeah, I don't think that can be right.
What was interesting about this is the people who conducted the survey asked respondents, what do you think the answer is? And then asked the respondents to self-identify as liberal, conservative. I don't know if they asked for, independent, but there was a marked difference in the two. Those who identified as liberal answered in the thousands.
And I bet people actually think it's tens of thousands.
Possibly so, yeah.
I'm getting answers that are different.
Okay, what do you have?
This is from 2024. 181 black people were shot to death by police.
Okay, so I believe the question was specifically black men, but I couldn't imagine that your numbers are going to be that much different there.
Yeah, this is just black people, but it's shot to death, not just shot.
I see.
Shot to death data seems to be everywhere. 2020, 1,000, and yeah, it looks like 1,000 or so is going to turn out to be the right answer.
Really?
I don't know. We should dig into this. Let's put a pin in this one and get back to it, because this is actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said it just off the cuff like that without the thing even in front of me. That would be interesting to see what those actual numbers are.
I think so too. The interesting thing for me here in the near term is that, okay, we're 45 days out from an election, and the FBI just told us that crime is down across the board.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, crime is way down, violent crime especially, since 1993, which was the peak of our violent crime problem.
That's right. And we wrote it at length on that in our book, Cooperation and Coercion. It's down markedly. I think the numbers were, of course, we wrote that book back in 2020.
But it's down 80%.
Yeah, it was down like 80% from the 1990s.
Which is a crazy number, right? You can say, oh, I want 80% success level here. I want to reduce this by 80% or increase that by 80%. That's damn near impossible.
Yep.
And yet that's what's happened with crime. And yet, here during election season, all I hear, and this is more prevalent from the Republicans than the Democrats, but I hear it from the Democrats too. All I ever hear is how bad crime is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, actually, it's not. How do I know? The FBI told me.
Right.
That should seem to be enough to seal the deal. I think they want me to believe that the FBI is lying to me. And they go on and on about how crime-ridden we are.
Well, it flies in the face of people's gut reaction. But their gut reactions are wrong, because what they're doing is reacting to the news. Every time an incident like this happens, the news is going to repeat it over and over and over and over again. What
we have ended up finding over and over again are people who say something like the following: there's no real crime in my town, but it's bad everywhere else.
Right. Yes. Yep.
People say this all the time. It's a variation of a sort on the assertion, well, I hate Congress, but my congressman's pretty good.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
If they say that in 435 districts, no, your congressman is probably not really good.
Right.
He's probably buying you off. But here we are. So who are we to believe? My eyes tell me I should be believing the FBI. How do I know? I don't see a lot of violent crime everywhere I go. And I did 1993 and before.
Yep.
And anybody old enough to have lived through that period knows it.
We'll put a link to the FBI's crime statistics in the show notes. I would encourage people who go to mess around with it to be careful about definitions, because they become very important. Things like homicide, for example. Depending on where you're looking, sometimes homicides include suicides. Sometimes they don't.
This comes to be a real issue. People get on our backs a little bit for not doing much with international examples. Try and define what a homicide is, even between the U.S. and Great Britain.
Right, and you get all kinds of problems that you got to dig into.
You can't reconcile those two countries, and those two countries are damn near the same country. What if you wanted to do the U.S. and, Turkey, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo?
Right.
Which seems to be neither Democratic nor a Republic now that I think about it, but nonetheless. And you take the point, right? When is a person murdered?
Yeah.
That seems to be so straightforward, and it isn't. So much so that you and I left it out of the book when we were writing it.
We left the foreigners out of the book, yeah.
Well, we left this murder thing out specifically because we couldn't figure out what a murder in Great Britain was.
Oh, right. Yeah. We did talk about homicides in the U.S. We also talked about mass shootings, and there you got to be careful as well, because the FBI has a particular definition of what a mass shooting is.
Yeah, isn't it 3 people or more injured?
3 or more, not counting the shooter. at a single event.
Right. If we're going to go down this road, how about school shootings? Well, a school shooting is a shooting that happens on school grounds. So if there is a disagreement between a drug dealer and a customer at 1 o'clock in the morning at a school, you've got a school shooting.
Or alternatively, if somebody drives into the school parking lot at 1 o'clock in the morning and commits suicide by gun, that also counts as a school shooting.
Let me just say this. When people read the breathless news stories and politicians fan the flames and they say idiotic like, oh, there's been 900 school shootings this year. That's 3 a day. No, there haven't been. Mm-hmm. And then you look into it, you start saying, okay, a school shooting in a rational person's brain is when some kid brings a gun to school and shoots up the school. Now we're looking at 9. Or 12.
Right.
And okay, 1 is too many, but the number of actual school shootings a year is incredibly low compared to the breathless reporting.
The take-home message here is, by all means, dig into the data, but you've got to do as much work or even more clarifying the terms that are being used. For one-stop shopping for all things James and Ant, visit our website, wordsandnumbers.org. We give a special shout out to our Patreon sponsors who help us keep the lights on. If you'd like to contribute, go to patreon.com/wordsandnumbers.
And look at what we ended up with here. Everywhere we look, when we talk about data, people are lying. Politicians are lying. The news media is lying. The thing that I've been trying to get the last 2 days, I hear all these people claiming, Republicans exclusively, and I guess this is a nice enough segue in because we're going to talk about lying politicians. What other kind is? I've been thinking about Haitians in Springfield, Ohio.
Yeah, what is going on there?
The Republicans are claiming, and they're aided and abetted by people in the media who accept their figures without checking them. The numbers that are getting thrown around, Ant, are that 15 to 20,000 Haitian immigrants have been dumped into Springfield, Ohio. And you would think, well, that could be a big deal, or it might not be. You look it up, and the population of Springfield, Ohio is about 80,000.
I was just typing it as you said that. 80,000.
It's about 80,000. So we're left with, whether that brought them to 80,000 or it brought 80,000 to 100,000. We're looking at, roughly speaking, 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 people in Springfield, Ohio is a Haitian refugee or immigrant or whatever noun you decide to put there.
Right.
Except the state of Ohio reports, as of 2023, that statewide, there are 5,000 Haitian immigrants.
5,000 statewide, yet 15,000 in this one town.
In a town of 80,000.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, at least one of those things has to be wrong.
You started off by talking about lying. I want to give people a little bit of a benefit of the doubt here. I think there's way too much, maybe not of overt lying, but people, and here I'll blame the media particularly, of hearing something that they agree with and just repeating it without bothering to do what you just did.
But it's even worse than that, right? Because I don't think, and I've been picking on Republicans a lot on this episode, let me turn my attention to the leftists, because I don't think anybody in the media that doesn't work for Fox News is on the side of the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. I mean, these people are hardcore leftists. That's what the media is. If you don't think that's right, I don't even know what to tell you. You're out of your mind. They overwhelmingly vote Democratic. Overwhelmingly. Like 9-1, right? Mm-hmm. In a field of 10. And yet, the people on the left, I'm looking at a CNN article right now. I checked the AP out not too long ago. I was on BBC. They all just take the 12 to 15 to 20,000 number and run with it.
Right. Yes.
Nobody ever cites a source.
Right.
I have no idea who made the assertion for the first time, but the assertion is almost certainly incorrect.
Here's where it really becomes a problem. If you're not going to check your sources and just repeat things, that's bad enough. But the problem here is I've seen too many people in the media blindly repeat things that they agree with, but look with a microscope at numbers they don't agree with. And so now you end up telling only one side of a story then. I'll give you an example of this. Did you know I got quoted or retweeted by Elon Musk a few days ago?
I do.
This was something I had tweeted back in, I don't know what, 2020 or 2022, somewhere in there.
Best get the fact checkers on it.
Well, this is the thing. I said, if you confiscate 100% of U.S. billionaires' wealth, you'll be able to fund the government with that money for less than 9 months. Fact checkers then went after that. I actually had a conversation with one of them at the time who came back and marked it as false. I said, what do you mean you're marking this as false? And she said, well, I did the math on this and you could actually fund the government for 9.5 months instead of 9. Therefore, it's false. Right. Yeah.
That's not false. That means it needs an update, for God's sake.
But this is the thing. You need to do one of two things. Either blindly repeat everything, whether you agree with it or not, or put everything under a microscope. But don't put under a microscope only the things that you don't agree with.
Let's talk about J.D. Vance for a couple of minutes. You know, frankly, prior to his becoming the nominee for vice president, I didn't think much of J.D. Vance. I didn't think about J.D. Vance very often.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And when I did, it was typically Hillbilly Elegy, a book that he wrote. And I think he actually did write it. A very good book, which gets into what life is like in Eastern Kentucky, a place you and I have been to many times that we actually have a great fondness for.
Yeah.
So if anything, I kind of liked J.D. Vance. The book was made into a pretty lousy movie, as is so often the case.
And I have to stop you here. Was he a congressman from Kentucky?
No, he's from Ohio, and he's a senator.
He's a senator from Ohio. Okay.
He says some really dopey now that he's running to be vice president. And one of the things, let's get back to Springfield, Ohio, all of these Haitian immigrants are stealing pets and eating them. You've heard this.
I've seen the headline. Yeah.
And yet nobody can show me a missing pet. There was one cat that actually made headlines for being missing. They found the thing in the owner's basement. Imagine that. It wasn't fricasseed. And yet he keeps saying it. When somebody really called him on it and said, hey, man, it's obvious that these things that you're saying are untrue. He said, if it gets us into the news cycle, doesn't matter if it's true or not.
Ooh, no, that's wrong.
Because so his argument went, Republicans don't get a fair shake from the Democratic press, and they don't. So if I can turn it back on you in some way, fair game. I think it's not. I'm still crazy enough to think that the truth matters.
Right.
And you and I on the very first Trump campaign called him and them out for their alternative facts nonsense. And yet nothing has changed. They went so far as to say that there's been a massive spike in crime in Springfield. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But when the mayor of Springfield was called on the phone and said, hey, how many Haitians are murder suspects? And he said, which is it?
Right.
And again, should I believe the FBI? Well, now should I believe the mayor of Springfield or somebody from Fox News? It seems the mayor would have a handle on this. And I have to say, I'm unsatisfied with the answers I've gotten about Springfield, Ohio. So everything I'm saying now, I think is preliminary with a giant footnote. I will get back to you later. I've got more questions to ask, and I'm going to find the right people to ask. We will get back to this. But I already know with 100% certainty that I'm being lied.
Yeah.
Why? What's so important that you'll lie about everything to get it? And it turns out the only thing that's that important is the ability to tell other human beings how to live. I'd rather if nobody had that ability in the first place. But if they're going to have that ability, I don't want a pack of liars doing it.
Well, okay, I get you, and all of this angers me as well. But I submit it's nothing new. Go back to the 1800s and you got the same thing going on.
That's right. And look, I wouldn't go back to the 1800s. I would go back to an administration that I actually did really think well of once upon a time and still think well of. Libertarians, for whatever the reason, have come to think that Ronald Reagan is a great villain in the story. He most certainly is not. He did more as president for the cause of liberty than anybody else in my lifetime and probably in 3 lives.
Yeah. Now, there are good counters, right?
Yeah, but look, on balance, that's the correct assessment. But I remember Oliver North putting his hand up and swearing before Congress that arms for hostages with Iran didn't happen. And yes, they did.
Yep.
Yes, they did.
Yep.
So, everybody's lying.
Mm-hmm. I guess on the one hand, you kind of expect it from the politicians. We all understand they're out there to tell us what we want to hear, so we will vote for them. What really annoys me is the media. Well, once upon a time, their job was to deliver the truth, the news.
It was to ferret out the lies.
Yeah, right. Yes.
And they did take that seriously. And for those of you who are thinking, as I have said a couple of times in this very episode, well, sure, the press will go after Republicans, but not Democrats, and we've got a partisan press. We always had a partisan press. Get used to it. The thing is that people from both parties were involved.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a partisan press now. Watch MSNBC and then watch Fox. Those two channels are owned and operated by two different political parties. The real problem is that neither of them take a thing seriously. They would rather have people on TV. You know who I'm thinking. It's all the usual suspects. They come on for their half-hour show. They bloviate. They don't do any research, and they gin up the base. Who does the research? Who actually digs in and does investigative journalism? Well, it turns out that's way more expensive than hiring a bloviator, because you have to hire a newsroom's worth of people, and they have to do it for years.
And they have to think critically, not emotionally.
Well, that's a tough nut to crack no matter where you look.
And when was the last time, I remember as a kid seeing more than once, enough that it stuck in my head, a major newscaster reporting something and stopping mid-report and saying to the camera, to the audience, no, this needs to be checked. I'm not going to report this.
I remember that too. And that was all the way down to local news.
Yeah.
They would do that sort of thing. But the last grand piece of investigative journalism was probably Watergate.
Mm-hmm.
It's come close a few times. And the Ollie North thing, I think that was reported on. And you get here and there, I think Bill Clinton's dalliances got a little bit of coverage, but not nearly as much as they should have. I think at this point, investigative journalism is all but dead. You're likelier to find it on a YouTube channel.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Lunatic civilian who just can't let something go. You're much more likely to find it there. And I actually watch those channels, and I think I get a lot of good information from it. But I don't turn on Fox or MSNBC. I rarely turn on CNN. More often than not, I go to the BBC, and I go out of country for American news.
I had an interesting experience a couple of weeks ago. I did not watch the debate, but the next day I was scanning through the news headlines. I wanted to know what had happened. And I swear, James, half of the headlines said Kamala Harris wiped the floor with Trump. The other half said Trump tore into Kamala Harris and she melted down.
If you look at my Twitter feed, I actually predicted that outcome an hour before the debate started.
To this day, I haven't seen the debate, and I really don't know what happened, because seeing those two sets of headlines, I didn't see any point reading anything.
No, Kamala Harris had her way with him. She baited him into emotional responses. She didn't say anything that was interesting in any way, but she goaded him into saying a bunch that he should never. She was undoubtedly the winner of that debate, if you can call it. I wouldn't call it a debate. I would call it an encounter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody's debating anything. But I am interested to see what kind of lies we hear in the vice presidential debate. And I think Tim Walz has a real problem, because he, on the campaign trail, came out and said, we can't afford 4 more years like this.
Ooh.
Literally the dumbest thing he could have said. What he meant to say was, we need 4 more years just like this.
He misspoke.
He did. He misspoke. He's going to have to account for that at some point, because you can bet 5 minutes prior to the vice presidential debate, the Trump campaign will be showing that in a campaign ad.
Yeah.
And, here you go. Let's all lie about everything. Ready, set, go. I think the vice presidential debate might be worse in a lot of ways. I'll tune in on October 1st, so none of you have to, and just monitor the Twitter feed. I try to keep it as hilarious as is humanly possible.
So the vice presidential debate is October 1st, you said. Is there another presidential debate?
Not at the moment. Donald Trump declared such supreme victory that he doesn't have to do it again.
I see. I can't imagine his people would be able to rein him in. If she's learned the technique for getting him going, she's going to do that and he's going to rise to the bait every single time.
And as is her custom, she spoke for an hour, hour and a half and managed not to say anything.
Yeah.
She's easily one of the dumbest politicians I've ever seen. And she's very likely going to be our next president. Great. I mean, just great. Is there anything they won't lie about? No, because the prize is too big. Power over you.
Well, more than that, Vance is now given a moral argument for why it's not just acceptable, but a moral imperative to lie.
It seems to be required. And it's not. A better person would know that. Mm-hmm. He doesn't. A better person might not end up in the Senate.
Yeah.
You may be hard-pressed to find a politician who has succeeded to that level who you'd want living next door to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's always how I look at it, right? Okay, let's not talk about who you want to be the leader of the free world. Would you want this person living next door? I can think in my lifetime, maybe 4 or 5,
right,
that I would say yes. And then people say, why don't we get the best and the brightest?
Well, the best and the brightest don't want to have anything to do with that.
That's right. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I don't know how you get around that problem, but we sure haven't. And that's all the time we've got this week on Words and Numbers. Until next time,
send us email, wordsandnumberspodcast@gmail.com.
Try to be nice to one person who doesn't deserve it. Till next week, can't take it easy.
See you next week, James.